I gotta say, there's something pretty racist about trying to make the first black female Supreme Court nominee have to answer for things like critical race theory, something that she has never ruled on nor advocated for in her career. Yet that's exactly what Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee did during the second day of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing. We've watched over the last year or so as reactionaries have seized on a rather obscure legal concept taught in college and grad school about systemic racism in our legal justice system, something known as critical race theory, be redefined in a way that it's now a catch-all for everything the right opposes. From teaching kids about the nation's history with slavery to now allowing a black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. Simply by existing and being nominated to the court, Judge Jackson did a critical race theory. It's according to the warped conservative mind. It's why Ted Cruz used most of his questioning on Tuesday to demand Judge Jackson answer for anti-racist children's books, which has nothing to do with critical race theory, but still makes reactionaries deeply uncomfortable. But that wasn't the only way the right debased itself during day 2 of the confirmation hearing. Lawmakers also attacked Judge Jackson for her prior work as a public defender representing Guantanamo Bay detainees. Here was Senator John Cornyn.
Why in the world would you call Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld and George W. Bush war criminals in a legal filing? It seems so out of character for you.
Senator, you may have been are you talking about briefs or habeas petitions that I filed?
Talking about when you were representing a member of the Taliban and the Department of Defense identified him as an intelligence officer for the Taliban, and you referred to the Secretary of Defense and the sitting President of the United States as war criminals. Why would you do something like that? It seems so out of character.
Well, Senator, I don't remember that particular reference, and I was representing my clients and making arguments. I'd have to take a look at what you meant. I did not intend to disparage the president or the Secretary of Defense.
Well, it'd be a lot cooler if you did, because they are actually war criminals. They authorized an illegal torture program. What Cornyn was getting at was the case of Gitmo detainee Kai Ali Ghul, who Jackson represented. In a legal filing, Jackson noted that Ghul was tortured while in the custody of the U.S. government, which constituted war crimes. And the named respondents in the legal filing were the President and Secretary of Defense at the time, George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld. So Judge Jackson never explicitly called them war criminals, but noted that her client was subjected to war crimes in a filing against the two men, which is completely true. Here was Senator Lindsey Graham accusing Judge Jackson of aiding the enemy during a time of war and explaining what he thinks needs to happen to the nearly 40 detainees still left at Gitmo.
I'm suggesting the system has failed miserably, and advocates to change this system, like she was advocating, would destroy our ability to protect this country. We're at war. We're not fighting a crime. This is not some passage of time event. As long as they're dangerous, I hope they all die in jail if they're going to go back and kill Americans. It won't bother me one bit if 39 of them die in prison. That's a better outcome than letting them go. And if it costs $500 million to keep them in jail, keep them in jail, because they're going to go back to the fight. Look at the friggin' Afghan government. It's made up of former detainees at Gitmo. This whole thing by the left about this war ain't working.
Meltdown mode activated. It should be troubling to all of us that within institutions like the U.S. Senate, accurately describing American war crimes and who is behind them is taboo. So Jackson had to pretend she never alleged such a thing. It's not taboo, though, to call for the continuation of war crimes, like locking so-called enemy combatants up without trial for decades until they die. The world's greatest deliberative body, folks. Anyways, stay tuned for more of the same during day 3 of the confirmation hearing later today. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki announced that she has tested positive for COVID just one day after she told reporters that the administration had run out of money to effectively fight the pandemic. Psaki joins a number of prominent Democrats in just the last few days who've contracted the virus, including Vice President Kamala Harris's husband, about a dozen House members and senators, former President Barack Obama, and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. None of them are very concerned about it, though, because they all have health insurance. Beginning this week, however, those that aren't insured won't have access to the same sort of testing and treatments as the insured do. The program set up to give providers money to cover the costs of testing and treating the uninsured for COVID is winding down. It will end in early April, but beginning this week, it is no longer accepting new claims. For the first time since testing and treatments have been available during the pandemic, care will be rationed based on who can afford it and who can't. In some ways, this has always been implicitly the case. Now it's explicit. The uninsured have already been acquiring COVID and dying of it at far higher rates than the insured, despite policies in place to make sure they have access to free treatments. A study last year by Families USA found that 40% of COVID cases and roughly a third of deaths were associated with lack of health insurance coverage. There are a number of reasons for this. The uninsured tend to be working class and were forced to work, often in close contact with others during the pandemic. Also, uninsured people tend to be shut out of the healthcare system in general, thus are difficult to reach for vaccination and treatment programs. Not knowing that they could get a vaccine or receive care, uninsured people just suffered from the virus at home, where many eventually died. That's one reason why officials think the official COVID death toll is much higher than what's been reported. The decision now to end federal support for treatments for the uninsured will be catastrophic to millions of people, especially as another wave of the pandemic looms. This is actually Psaki's second time getting COVID in the last 5 months, which belies the idea of natural immunity. It also suggests that the White House strategy of just living with the virus means being willing to contract it over and over again. Particularly dangerous gamble given how little we know about the long-term effects of COVID, even in mild and non-symptomatic cases. A study published this month out of the UK found evidence of brain damage among people who got the virus. Researchers reported gray matter loss in the brain equivalent to 10 years of aging, plus tissue damage and cognitive decline. And those changes to the brain occurred not just in cases that required hospitalization, but also milder cases. Earlier this month, Senator Tim Kaine introduced legislation to study long COVID. Kaine said he still suffers from nerve damage after getting the virus. His bill would devote more funding to researching the topic. You would think information like that would be essential for public health officials before crafting policy, but instead, an aging generation of people who grew up eating lead paint chips and have brain damage from it are now trying to subject the rest of us to the same fate via COVID. A real sick country. And finally, the DC Trucker Convoy plans to continue its protests in the city throughout the week. It started as an emulation of the Canadian trucker protests against COVID-19 lockdown measures. But here in the US, there are no such measures. Not even mask mandates exist here in Washington anymore. So, not exactly sure what the truckers are doing, except fulfilling nihilistic urges to annoy people. They've spent the week trying to create traffic by taking slow laps around the Beltway. I actually live not too far off the highway here in DC, and I can hear the group when it passes by. They've annoyed a bunch of residents, but beyond a meeting with Senators Ted Cruz and Ron Johnson, nobody really gives a shit about them. So to get some attention, one of the leaders of the convoy, a guy named Ron Coleman, claimed that the group was going to up their tactics, that they were going to try to do citizens' arrests on DC police officers and the mayor, Muriel Bowser. Yeah. You know, honestly, I say go for it. They either fail, which would be funny as hell, or they succeed, which would also be very funny. Not a big fan of the cops or the mayor over here. Now, you're probably wondering why the fascist truckers want to arrest cops, or at least what reason they've provided. Well, truckers speaking with Coleman say that they haven't been able to go to the bathroom because police have blocked exits while circling the Beltway, which has left people, quote, having actually pissed their pants. Wow. They're just admitting it. I haven't really discussed this story on the show too much because I don't want to give attention to a bunch of pathetic losers, but the DC Trucker Convoy has now reached a level of humiliation that I think is actually newsworthy. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to see Means Morning News in its complete form, not just the clips we post here, head on over to Means TV and get access to all our new episodes and our entire backlog, plus tons of other great movies and original TV shows.